Thank you for joining us today for the Conformed to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays. Here with me is Jay Jones, and this is Text Driven Tuesday.
It is. Text Driven Tuesday.
Yep.
I like that little fade out. That was a perfect fade out.
It was
pretty nice.
Real nice, yeah. Jay.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a good weekend?
It was good.
All right.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. Abigail had a school event Saturday night, and then we had church service Sunday.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, we had a good day. A lot of guests.
We did. Yeah, we did.
Yep, we've had several. Yep. And they're still coming back, it would seem.
Yeah. We're not driving them away just yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Gotta keep trying.
So, yeah, it was nice. It was a good day. Yep. So, Thursday, Brooke slides back in to first because she got a hit. She rounded first too long. Because I was wondering, like, how did you get hurt sliding back into first? Because they don't pick people off, right? In softball, they have to, like, stand on the bag.
Right.
Well, I'm like, she rounded too big. And she slides back in. She hops up. She's like, my finger was backwards.
Oh, no.
And pointed back. So I got a phone call from Brooke, and she's like, Dad, I dislocate my finger. And then the trainer gets on the phone from whatever school they were at. Like, yeah, you're going to want to take her to get some x-rays. So the lady was able to, like, pop her finger back in place. And I thought for sure it's broken. It was all purple all the way down. And it's not broken. So I got the x-ray, and they're like, yeah, we can see you clearly dislocated it there, and your finger came out and slid back over top of itself. And because she told me, she's like, it was pointed backwards toward me, and it was like an inch too short. She's a tough cookie. Didn't even cry. So she's back at it.
I may have cried. Something like that happened to me.
She's back in action today on the field.
Okay.
She said, I'm good to go. Oh, all right. Knock yourself out.
Yeah. Did you see that video I sent you yesterday?
Which one?
It was the player that broke his bat.
Oh yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, where it broke between his hands.
We're
gonna have to bring that on Free for All Friday just to show what it looked like. It was so cool.
And he still got on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he still got a hit.
Never seen a bat break like that before.
It was it was bizarre.
Yeah. That's a flaw in the wood.
Yeah.
So
looked like it was detachable.
Yeah. We'll bring that on Free for All Friday. We're also gonna have to bring in that latest weird video of Will Smith and his wife. Did you see it?
Oh
goodness gracious!
I don't know if I want to watch that again.
Somebody rescue that man.
That was painful to watch the first time. I don't know if I want to watch it a second time.
His friends need to do an intervention and rescue him.
I don't know how anyone can be on her side after watching that video. She just seems like a terrible person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
I'll show
it. Thanks for giving me a heads up so I can prepare for that.
We'll have to just show it. I mean, it's going to make so much. This is going to make sense after you watch this. So, well, we probably ought to talk about the text.
Okay.
What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's jump right in.
It's Text Driven Tuesday time.
Professional transition.
Yeah.
All right. So you finished the book. You finished the book of Habakkuk on Sunday. You finished this with chapter 3.
Yeah. Finished it. Yep.
What do you want to tell us about chapter 3 in kind of setting the stage?
Okay, so after God responds back to Habakkuk, they've had this back and forth kind of dialogue going on. God says, I'm going to do something about the Babylonians, and he gave the 5 woes, and that was what we looked at last time. The 5 woes that God gives of judgment, and it's on Babylon, but it's really on all the wicked. And so all that Habakkuk has left now is, a final response. He's kind of come to grips with the reality of what's about to take place. Judgment's coming upon Judah. Judgment eventually will be coming to Babylon. But now he's come to grips with what's happening. The world as he knows it is ending, and he doesn't feel fine, George. I gotcha. I gotcha with that one. You hesitated. A little dad joke there for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of the world.
I'm surprised you didn't have that to play.
What? The clip?
Uh-huh.
That would have been a good one if we were more professional.
Okay.
I could have played that. Though we probably would have got it probably would have pulled it offline for copyright infringement or something stupid.
Yeah.
It's the end of the world as Habakkuk knows it. He doesn't feel fine. It's the end of the world. And he prays. So the chapter 3 is a prayer. So he prays to God. And what's good about it is I learned a lot about how to pray. Like, when something really bad happens to you, you maybe don't even know what to pray. Maybe you just are consumed with thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we do that before anything bad ever happens, and usually nothing bad happens. But he kind of shows us, like, hey, what does it look like to pray when, like, something terrible has really happened? And I think that's, we have the model prayer that Jesus gives. I did a lesson on prayer once from that. It was very beneficial. And there's books written, from Jesus, how he teaches us to pray. But God teaches us to pray in other parts of the Bible too. Sometimes we just maybe don't pay close attention to them.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, one of those places.
My wife pointed out to me after we left church that I've preached this passage before.
Yeah.
At this church.
Yeah. Habakkuk 3.
It was the end of December 2019. It's probably online. I completely forgot that I'd preached this, so that was a fun little.
Yeah, I forgot too. COVID hit, and then the whole world pretty much fell apart. So,
which hey, that was
maybe it was God providentially getting us ready for.
Yeah,
it.
Maybe. I just didn't remember that I'd preached it. So
that's pretty funny when you think, do people ever remember what I preach?
Yeah.
And now you know the answer is absolutely not.
Oh yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
Because you don't even remember what you preached, George.
Yeah, there were a couple of people who remembered when I brought it up, but I didn't remember.
That's funny.
I don't know. I don't remember how I preached it. I haven't gone back and looked at my outline. But you did a good job.
That's funny.
But I'm sure that's online somewhere.
Yeah,
on the church.
It's up there
on the church page. Yeah.
Individual sermons.
So you can compare. You can listen to my terrible sermon that I can't even remember preaching.
It was probably
you can listen to yours.
It was probably good, George. It probably was good.
All right. So we don't pray like this. Is what that was kind of your thesis.
Yeah.
Had a little bit of pushback on that in community group.
Really?
And there was a little nuance that was thrown in there that might be interesting to think about. That there are probably people who pray like this in private that wouldn't pray this in public.
Okay.
And also the situation I brought up, like when people were talking about it, I brought up, the situation is going to determine what your prayer is like.
Yeah.
This, like you said, this is the end of the world.
Uh-huh.
No matter how bad
we've
had it, probably haven't had it this bad. And if you just got you just get the phone call that you got the job promotion and your kid's an honor student and whatever, you get all this good news. This isn't going to be the prayer that you turn around and pray. So it's very situation specific. But one person said this may be the way that some people pray when they hit this situation.
Yeah, maybe so.
Because this is a man who doesn't have any inhibition. Like everything is falling apart, and it's this is all he can do.
Yeah.
This isn't a rote prayer. This isn't a prepared prayer. This is you called it like word vomit.
He emotionally
he's
throws
just
up.
Throwing up.
Yeah, he's emotionally throws up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't the kind of prayer I don't think that you can prep for this. Like this is the kind of prayer that is going to be just out of the overflow of desperation, I guess. But there is, I was trying to jot down some reasons why we don't pray like this, even in a. So we'll talk about your 3 points, because you're bringing out how can we learn how to pray like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to jot down some reasons why maybe we don't pray like Habakkuk.
Yeah.
So I just
It'll be interesting to hear what you have.
So I just put down a few. I don't think this is an exhaustive list. But I think the two big ones, I think, or maybe the three big ones. We don't know God.
Mm.
So the reason why Habakkuk can pray this way is because he knows who God is. Right.
Well, you mean in the way that he does.
Right. Yeah, we don't know God the way that Habakkuk knows God.
Mm.
We don't know our Bibles. I mean, we'll talk about this. That Habakkuk's prayer is full of Bible,
mm-hmm.
and if you don't know your Bible, you're not going to be able to pray your Bible.
Right.
We don't believe God, at least not the way that Habakkuk does after receiving this. But then some of the things that I think that are really, sin gets in the way of our prayers. We're lazy, so we don't pray.
Mm.
We're busy. So we're not going to spend time. Like we'll have you read it in just a second. We can time how long it takes you to read
Start
this.
the timer.
And I think a lot of us don't even pray as long as this prayer, because we're just so busy that we don't even carve out the time to pray like this. And then I think that we're distracted by worldly things. When bad things happen, we try to drown it out by doing something else.
Right.
We try to distract ourselves from things like this. So we're not going to pray like this because we're too numb from binge watching a TV show for hours, and so we don't spend time praying like this.
Mm-hmm.
Those were just some of the things.
Good
that
observations.
I was just kind of jotting things down, just brainstorming while you were were preaching.
I think you're right. Yeah,
and I'm sure there's others, but this is not just. I haven't been taught to pray like this. I think a lot of it is, we just don't prioritize praying like this. Mm-hmm. It's just not something that we consider important.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And one aspect of it too, that comes out of the model prayers, is we're told that we should pray to a father, and a lot of times we don't approach God like a father.
Right.
Not a good father, not a good loving, caring father. We kind of approach him like I said, like he's the president, but maybe like if the president were your friend. Right. You'd know him a little bit, but still you would be more careful with how you talk to him than you would maybe if you're coming home and just laying it all out for your dad.
Yeah.
You know.
Josiah is at the stage where every little thing will set him off. Mm-hmm. He hurts himself. I mean, he's clumsy. He'll fall down, and it's nothing, but he starts crying. Where does he go?
Probably to his mommy.
Right. Yeah. He didn't go to me. Like, walk it off. He cries for mommy. Right? Why does he cry for mommy? Why does he seek out mommy when he hurts? Because he knows that mommy loves him and will take care of him. That's how we should approach God. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of times we don't trust the character of God, and so we don't go to him like this.
Yeah.
But if we really believe what God's word says about God, how God's revealed himself, and we really knew him this way, I think praying like this we wouldn't have to really be twisting people's arms to pray like this. Right. It should be intuitive. Right. Okay, let's have you pray. Let's have you read it. Read the prayer. Okay. I'm going to time you and see how long it takes you to read this.
Okay. You ready? Yep. Let me take a sip of the coffee.
Okay.
Get the vocal cords warmed up. All right. Here we go. All right. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to Shigionoth. O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. His brightness was like the light. Rays flashed forth from his hand, and there he veiled his power. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He looked and shook the nations. Then the eternal mountains were scattered. The everlasting hills sank low. His were the everlasting ways. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction. The curtain of the land of Midian did tremble. Was your wrath against the rivers, O Lord? Was your anger against the rivers, or your indignation against the sea? When you rode on your horses, on your chariot of salvation, you stripped the sheath of your bow, calling for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. The raging waters swept on. The deep gave forth its voice. It lifted its hands on high. The sun and moon stood still in their place. At the light of your arrows as they sped, at the flashing of your glittering spear. You marched through the earth in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You trampled the sea with your horses, the surging of mighty waters. I hear, and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. To the choir master with string instruments.
All right. Took you 2.5 minutes to read that.
It's not very long.
Not very long. Not very long.
That is not long at all.
Which
I thought it would be longer.
Which again, I think I still think that many of us don't take the time to pray.
That is a 2.5 minute grade A prayer.
Yeah.
Start your day off like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you are your 3 points are coming out of this text and teaching 3 ways that we can pray, following the example of
I'm kind of
Habakkuk.
trying to observe like the structure of the prayer,
Yeah.
and like the way, like what is he doing in these parts?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's you don't preach poetry like you preach a letter from Paul.
Yeah.
So you don't hone in on every single word so much as the big idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a challenge. I know sometimes I want to hone in on on the lines and just take it line by line. But if you're doing an expositional sermon, that's not going to explain the text
Right.
in a helpful way.
Mm-hmm.
It might be good if you're in like a small group study or by yourself studying through it to look at each line and look at the words, but you're trying to get the whole meaning.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got and then we'll bring out some of these specifics as we go along, but the big idea are 3 ways to pray. And so the first way is to plead transparently for God to faithfully keep his promises. At least that's how I jotted it down. I don't know if that's exactly how you worded it, but that's how I jotted it down.
Yeah, you've got it.
So pleading transparently for God.
Yeah. So there's a level of openness with how Habakkuk is feeling, I think, that is helpful for us to see here. And he's afraid. That's, what it comes right down to that.
Yeah.
He's heard of the Lord, of the report of his work. What work is that? That's the work God told him he's going to do. And he believes it. He's afraid. And there's a pattern that's in verse 2 that is repeated in verses 3 through 16. So it's of like hearing or remembering who God is and his works, and it causing Habakkuk to fear or to tremble. And he gets very specific about his fear in verse 16. His body trembles, his lips are quivering, rottenness enters his bones. That's kind of like just a term. Like the Hebrew translation over to English is interesting. That they mean something like my legs are giving way, I'm about to faint. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like you feel you're going weak.
Okay.
Like his bones aren't decaying. That's the term that he's giving.
Right.
He's trembling, and he's afraid because he had just described, as we'll see here in a little bit, he's described God as a mighty warrior, and using this. Well, I think it's more literal probably than a lot of scholars do. I think he's describing Jesus. I think he's describing the angel of the Lord from the Old Testament and his works that he did in judging Egypt and rescuing his people. And now he's afraid because this warrior is riding at the front of the Babylonian army, coming against Judah. And he's afraid. Who wouldn't be afraid?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That is a completely logical and expected if you're a believer. Now, he takes this report back. Habakkuk shows the right response. I think, contrary to what Word of Faith people would tell you, that you probably heard them say things like, if you ever, fear is simply a lack of faith. It's a lack of trust in God. But I think Habakkuk shows the opposite, because he has a report and he goes back with the report, and I promise you there are people that didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And they weren't afraid.
The Word of Faith people would go so far as to say that Habakkuk is creating this. He's attracting this with his words.
Right.
So just him saying the things that he says in verse 16 would bring it to
He's
pass.
brought it upon himself. Yeah.
And so we shouldn't speak these words of fear. We should instead speak words of faith.
Right.
And so they set them against each other.
Yeah.
Like you say.
Which doesn't make any sense at all. Habakkuk understands the message. He believes the message. God's given Habakkuk no guarantee. This is like we don't want to get in our mindset, okay, where we say God's judgment falls on the world, but he always protects his people. God always protects his promises, and the believing community will be safe. He'll always have a believing remnant.
Yeah.
But believers died in this.
Oh, yeah.
Like he didn't put a bubble wrap, spiritual bubble wrap around everybody and say, oh, you guys will go into exile. I'll preserve your life.
Yeah.
Like the nation is about to get thrashed. Family members will die. Everything he knows. It's the end of the world. That's what, if you could describe the end of the world, it's coming. He believes it. And because he has faith that he knows who God is, and he knows who this warrior is, he's afraid.
I like how you brought out Romans 3, the description of unbelievers.
Yeah, there's no fear of God before their eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't expect the unbelievers to hear this and be afraid.
Yeah.
You expect them to hear it and just kind of shrug it off.
Yeah, they have no faith.
Right.
It's the same thing, if you were to tell someone the gospel and the consequences of, continuing in rebellion against God in sin. They don't believe you. They may even laugh at you. It demonstrates a lack of faith. Now, the opposite effect is usually what happens when God is calling out his people from the world. When Christ calls his sheep to himself, they're sinners when they hear the gospel, just like everyone else. But when the effectual call comes, they're traumatized. Sproul coined the term, the trauma of the holy. What is that? It's being struck with the fear of God. You're afraid.
Yeah.
But then you run in faith to the only one who can rescue you, which is God himself, which is Christ.
Yeah. So we probably should take just a little bit of time to talk about the different kinds of fear, because you're talking about the fact that Habakkuk believes God's word. He knows that God has spoken and that God is, he's terrible in his holiness. And so he fears. But what do we do with verses in the New Testament that like 1 John, perfect love cast out all
Right.
fear. Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with those? So what are we talking about here? Fear here and fear in those, maybe those verses.
I think it's pretty simple when it comes to this. That type of fear is fear of the world, fear of man, fear of what they can do to you, fear of loss of reputation, even physical harm. We shouldn't fear those things, right? That's to live in fear in that way is to actually demonstrate a lack of faith in God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the opposite of that would be, to fear God, which is healthy. And I've said before, there's only 2 things I fear in this world: God and great white sharks. And I live in Oklahoma, so I don't live in a lot of fear, George.
Yeah.
Except for in fear of the Lord. You know what I'm saying? You could throw me in the wilderness and have a grizzly bear come after me, and I promise you, the fear level would be minuscule compared to me watching a video of a great white shark swimming at the screen. It's irrational. It demonstrates a lack of faith. I don't know. But people don't fear, people on the other side, they don't fear God, right? That demonstrates a lack of faith. Whereas like for the believer to fear the things of the world demonstrates a lack of faith, and the non-believer to not fear God demonstrates a lack of faith.
With perfect love cast out all fear, is that dealing with judgment? Is that in the context of judgment?
Well, I think it part of that is that we don't have to fear what will happen like in our eternal security anymore.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that we don't have a reverential awe and fear of who God is. Yeah. Nor do I think it means that we don't have a healthy fear of even displeasing God. I think we should have a fear of that. Like if we're going to give an account for every word you say, right? And like so every sermon you've ever preached, you've got to stand before Jesus.
Yeah.
Are you afraid of him that he's eternally going to damn you?
No.
But do you fear it?
Yes.
See, there's a type. It's a nuanced fear.
Right. And Paul says this in Philippians chapter 2: work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
Right.
Because you do have to give an account to God.
Right.
And it is again, it's the same thing you're talking about. The person who's merely professing faith in Christ with their words, but not with their life, and lives without any fear, they're probably not actually a believer.
Right.
But the one who actually knows, I am going to have to give an account to God, and so I want to obey his word, that's the person that is probably a genuine believer.
Right. Yeah. Anxiety and fear are linked in a way. A lot of these things can be good. They can be healthy. They can be natural, right? Like you can have
even the fear of great white sharks, even though you live in Lawton, Oklahoma, where I don't even know where the closest shark would even be at this current moment, Jay. But it's a healthy fear.
Yeah.
It's just like my fear of I hate snakes.
Yeah.
Not all snakes, but the fear is there might be venomous ones.
Yeah.
Right. That's
a
healthy fear.
So for when you first see one, you kind of instinctually recoil.
Yeah, because
it could save your life one day.
Yeah. There's good fear. God has built into us a healthy fear that is for the preservation of our lives or the lives of others. When it becomes sinful fear is when you are irrational about it.
Right.
So you don't stay in your house because you're afraid that a great white shark is going to attack
and I'll
you.
Even get it.
You're not afraid of Sharknado.
I'll even get in the ocean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I'm afraid, but I'll get in because I'm playing the odds. I'm like I'm more likely to get hit by lightning.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It becomes sinful, unbelieving fear when you won't go out of your house because of this, or if it's affecting the way that you live, you're so afraid that something's going to happen, because now you're not having a healthy fear that preserves your life. You're having a sinful fear that believes that God's not going to take care of you.
Right.
And you've stopped trusting that God cares for his people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, if I saw one in the water with me, I'm having a heart attack.
Oh, that's a healthy fear.
Yeah, and it's gonna, and it will eat a already dead person. Because I will have already died.
Okay. That might be borderline sinful fear. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that we had some qualifications there, because there's different kinds of fear that's being talked about in the Bible.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're told to fear, and other times we're told not to fear, and so we need to make sure that we understand that the Bible's not contradicting itself. It's nuancing what fear is.
Yeah. And I think even with Habakkuk too, when we think like he's a person, right? So he's fearing even the conditions that come afterward.
Right.
We wouldn't expect a person, a normal human, just to go. Now, I guess it
Right.
It is what it is. We'll all go into captivity.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's part of fear that's not always sinful.
Mm-hmm.
It just is something that would make sense.
Right.
Now, will it? I don't think, if he survived and went into captivity with Daniel, I wouldn't see him being swallowed by fear for the rest of his life. I'd kind of see him doing what Daniel does.
Right. And I think there's almost like bookends to this prayer.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, he talks about his fear, but at the end, we see how he is resolved to live
Right.
in spite of his fear.
Yep.
He's not paralyzed by it
Mm-hmm.
because he is still trusting in God.
Yes, perfect.
But this is the kind of transparency that we need to have in our prayer life. How do we go about kind of cultivating this kind of transparency? Because I think a lot of people they it's like you said, they feel like they're distant from God.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't walk up to a stranger and just pour your. I mean, there are there are weird people out there that will do that, but I won't do that. Like going up to a stranger and just pouring out my heart.
Right.
You pour it out to someone that you know, but I think that we still kind of treat God like this stranger that we have to be reserved.
Right.
How do we go about cultivating this kind of transparency?
Well, first, I think, is to be honest with yourself about what's going on. A lot of times we can trick ourselves into thinking things aren't maybe as they really are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're not even completely honest with ourselves about things. We'll, like with my kids, for instance, right? They're real go-getters. And I'll say, hey, come and talk to me for a second about this, whatever's going on. They're like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, no, listen, I've already walked in your shoes. I've done all these things you are currently doing. I've done them all, and I even know how you feel, right? This is how you kind of feel. You're kind of anxious about it, right? Well, I guess so, right? But see, like, they won't even be honest at first with themselves about it.
Yeah,
we do that too.
Mm-hmm. I think I hadn't planned on bringing this, but I ran across this tweet. I sent it to you. You never responded. You probably were too busy playing Elden Ring or something.
Text message?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not getting my text notifications. I'm going to have to delete the app and reload it. Yeah, I'm having it's messed up. If I go there, like I went this morning, I saw there were texts, but...
Okay. So I ran across this tweet, and I don't know who this guy is, but he said, I believe the very best days, and I mean the very best days, he put it all in caps, of the SBC are in front of us, not behind us.
Perfect example. Perfect example.
It's like putting these blinders on and ignoring all the problems and just he goes on to say this isn't to downplay the positive moments in our past, but to express a great optimism for the future. This is naive optimism. Mm-hmm. That is ignoring the serious problems. It's downplaying like the criticism. These are just fringe groups, and there's not really these problems. We can deal with these. And so, if you do that, you're not going to be honest about how desperate the situation is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not really being real honest. We have these like after action reviews we do, and if your leaders were really good, it would be a place of brutal honesty.
Yeah.
And it could be a place where the people, and you do some military operation, and the people that actually messed up could actually own it without getting their life ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea is you own your mistakes, and then everybody can get better from it. But you can't if you're not honest.
Yeah.
And so that's how you start with yourself. Like you gotta actually be honest with yourself and not fool and put these blinders and rose-colored glasses.
Right.
They say.
Yeah.
It's always be honest, and then you take that directly to God. You have to have the correct idea of God, as like you gave that illustration, which was great, of Josiah. But this is how God describes himself to us, that we don't have because we don't ask.
Right.
How much more clear can you get? Like, I want to hear.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you. To come before him as a father, that Jesus has given us that right.
Yeah.
It's a right that we have now.
It's amazing. It's amazing that the sovereign of the universe, he has extended this invitation for us to come to him and ask.
Right.
And we're like, nah.
Mm-hmm.
We have like this reservation, like God's going to judge us for what we're bringing to him, even though he already knows.
Yeah. And that's what I said. It's foolish not to be transparent because he already sees through everything anyway.
Right.
He's already got it all.
Yeah.
So you might as well just bring it all to him.
Right.
So thinking rightly about him, that he does want to hear. He doesn't want you to come all pretending.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just wants.
Right.
You're one of his adopted children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through Christ. So.
Yeah. But he believes God. I mean, that's the end of verse 16, that he describes his fear in these really visceral language. But then he says, "Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us."
Yeah.
God has told him what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't told Habakkuk, "You're going to see it."
Right.
This is 70 years, 70 plus years in the future. And yet he believes the promises of God.
Yes.
And so that's like the foundation. And so he can express his fear while at the same time expressing his faith.
Yeah. And in the midst of that, and him being transparent in that fashion, he pleads with God to keep his promises.
Yeah.
In wrath, remember mercy. It's covenantal. It's a covenantal buzzword.
Right.
Like if you study the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
God's
is that hesed?
I don't know.
Come on, Jay.
I didn't.
You can't just throw out this is covenantal buzzword, and then when I ask you if it's the covenantal buzzword, you're like, I don't know.
If it's the actual word, let me just tell you.
Okay, all right.
Let's see.
I probably could look it up myself, but
the term is rahim.
Okay.
Mercy.
Okay.
But if you put the phrases together to remember mercy,
yeah,
you're getting at the covenantal idea that God will do what he promised to do through Moses.
Okay.
Which is after he judges the people and they're taken away into exile to the nations, he'll remember mercy and bring them back.
Okay. All right. So that's the first point, pleading transparently for God to faithfully keep his promises.
Yeah.
The second point, the second way in which we can learn how to pray from this passage is to praise God for his awesome works in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And this, you can see this in verses 3 through 15.
Right.
Now, he doesn't just, you have to know your Bible, right, when you're reading this, because he doesn't just come out and say, I'm talking about Mount Sinai. Right. I'm talking about the Exodus. I'm talking about the conquests. He's using language that we have to be familiar with already in order to understand what he's talking about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there are a couple of there's big clues like right off the bat. These two locations that are given. Now you probably have to look it up because my Bible geography is such that I'm like, where's Teman?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, do you have your Bible geography down that much? Like, it's maybe mentioned like one time else?
I mean, even when I went into the maps at the end of my Bible, Mount Dimon wasn't there.
Yeah.
Mount Paran wasn't there. There's the wilderness of Paran, but it doesn't actually pinpoint where Mount Paran is.
So I think Timon is
I think this is
the grandson of.
It's Edom, isn't it?
It is. It's an Edomite city,
but
I think he's the grandson. Is he the grandson of great grandson of Lot?
Oh, I don't know.
I have to look it up.
But this is kind of I mean, it's off the beaten path, but this is kind of a plea. Don't be lazy Bible readers.
Yeah.
Like you can't approach the text lazily and expect it to all just be straightforward, just plainly laid out for you. My preaching professor would always say, you don't put the cookies on the bottom shelf.
Yeah.
Like you put them up where you gotta.
So you
have to work. You have to
like
work
a little kid. You gotta pull out all the drawers and climb
if you want
to
if you want to get to those freshly baked cookies, you're gonna have to work for it.
Yeah.
But when you get to it, oh, it's sweet, Jay.
There you go.
It's the same with studying our Bibles. The good stuff is it only yields itself to diligent students of the text, right?
Yeah. So these two locations. They kind of tell you, hey, here's like a region of what he's going to pray and remember where God worked at, and that region is the wilderness and Egypt and the Red Sea. So he's remembering the great rescue of God as God worked powerfully in a theophany. Mm-hmm. It's a manifestation of God in this realm, in the physical realm. God came into the physical realm, and his power was revealed. Even though it says it's revealed, but it's veiled.
I love that. So this is Exodus 19 language. This is when Yahweh descends on Mount Sinai, and there's smoke, and there's darkness, and lightning, and fire, and trumpets, and the people are so afraid that when God speaks to them from the mountain, they plead with Moses, tell Yahweh not to speak to us anymore. You go talk to him and come back and tell us what he says. Right. And I love what he says. It was there that you veiled your power. Uh-huh. They're so afraid that they can't approach Yahweh, and yet it's his veiled power. Uh-huh. That's just a great line.
Yeah. Yep. And so there's this very expressive language used of God. And it kind of has like the effect of, like, are you meant to like obsess over every line? Perhaps, but if you just read it and take the cumulative effect, it's kind of like a big action scene in a movie, right? Like if you watch The Last Battle, when Captain America is standing out there and all the gates open up and all the superheroes fly in.
Right.
And like it's about to go down with Thanos, and then there's this massive battle, and you're like, whoa, right? You probably don't put it in slow motion and watch it in slow-mo because you're going to miss it. It's not going to
Well, I mean, if you do slow motion, you'll be able to pinpoint Howard the Duck in the background, Jay. But
so that it's the same thing. Like you let it run, and then you go, wow.
Yeah, right.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to stand in awe of who this God is. That's what he's doing. He's remembering God's mighty, awesome works. He's standing in awe of him. He thinks God's awesome.
Right. And so he's talking about Sinai. I think verse 5 is talking about the plagues of Egypt. Mm-hmm. So you've got the Exodus, you've got the Red Sea. You come to verse 11. You have the sun and the moon stood still. That's probably the event in Joshua.
Right.
So the conquest. So here's all these things that God has done, delivering his people in powerful ways.
Yep.
And what does this do for his prayer life?
So you can understand how this would be important to think about God in this way, because they need to be rescued again. Mm. And so it's instilling hope that the God who is bringing us into captivity is the same God who has promised to deliver us again out of it. Mm. And he's true to his words, and he will work again to save his people.
Yeah. So we got to talk about verse 13. Because I think that this is something that is often missed when we talk about the Old Testament, especially some of these prophets. Like Habakkuk does not explicitly say a savior is coming. He doesn't, though he does use the word anointed.
Yeah,
that's Mashiach, right? The Messiah,
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably not. It's probably not a direct reference to the Messiah. It's probably Moses.
Probably with the Red Sea language and
Mhm.
Exodus, it's probably Moses.
Right.
It could even stand for the whole people.
Okay.
But probably Moses.
Yeah. But there's language there that if you are, again, familiar with the Bible, you're picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
So you went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck.
Yeah.
That's Genesis 3:15 language.
Yep.
And that is not Moses.
Right.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think what is often missed is that these Old Testament prophets, even when they're not explicitly talking about there's a savior coming in the future, they don't use that language. He doesn't talk about David coming or anything like that. But he's using this language that reminds us that Habakkuk he's a believer. Like he's not just focusing on the here and now. He's not just focusing on the end of exile.
Right.
He is anticipating the coming of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened in the past, in the Exodus, in the way that God saved his people, he's anticipating that God's going to do it again in the future.
Yep.
And so it's both looking backwards and looking forward
Mm-hmm.
to something even greater than the Exodus.
Right.
And I think that language there it should hit us in the face.
Yeah.
Like we should say, oh, I know what that is.
Right.
Like that's the language of the Messiah who's going to come, and he's not just going to fix the Babylonian problem. He's going to fix the Israel problem. He's going to fix the world's problem.
Yeah. And what's interesting to look at is back in Deuteronomy, when you look at Deuteronomy 30, the end of that promise, after God remembers mercy to rescue his people, is the promise of heart circumcision.
Yeah.
So it's all intertwined together.
Right. And there's two stages to the return from exile.
Mm-hmm.
The first stage is bringing them out of physical captivity, but the second is when the Messiah comes and he actually delivers them from sin. Right.
Yeah.
I love that next verse. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Like he uses the weapons of the enemy
to
against
destroy them.
And he's talking about what God's done in the past, but we know that a greater typology, right? Like this pattern is emerging through the text that culminates in what happens with Jesus.
Right.
And God, he uses death to defeat death.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. You picked up on that in my last
pretty
point
great.
when
Yeah.
I said that. I'm glad someone was paying attention.
Well, hey. Yeah, so you mentioned that we should be able to pray this prayer in a way that even Habakkuk couldn't pray this prayer.
Yeah. If Habakkuk can look back and remember all the great and mighty works of God and how God has worked to rescue his people, how much more can we do that? I mean, like this mighty warrior that he's describing, who has these weapons, a glintering spear and these arrows, and how he crushes the head of the enemies, how he is just sweeping through wrath, and the mountains are like trying to run away from him.
Right.
They're terrified of him. This person was born as a baby for us, and we remember that. We have to remember that. Like we think of the baby Jesus, and we go, oh, but we forget all of this power was humbled. He humbled himself and became a man.
How do we lose this, right? So the Old Testament, they have these theophanies, and they're really dramatic. And then the New Testament, we have a baby born, and it's not like he does miracles, but it's not the mountains are shaking, and there's fire, and there's lightning and loud trumpets, and this this big spectacle. But we miss the fact that they had the theophany. Here's God actually in the flesh.
Right.
Like they actually saw him and heard him and could touch him, and this is better than that.
Yeah.
Have we been so desensitized by like those action movies? We're looking for the spectacle that we miss what really is the most fantastic event.
Yeah, most fantastic thus far until the new heaven and the new earth.
Right.
But this first time, it's all veiled in his humility. Even the glory that we'll see at his second coming wasn't seen. I mean, John says we beheld his glory, but the glory is veiled. The glory was veiled at Sinai. It's veiled even more in his birth, but it's still there. It's still present. It comes in the signs that he does, and you can see, and all his signs demonstrate his power in very precise, specific ways to teach things about us. I mean, you have him trampling the sea.
Right.
He's doing the things that he does in a literal fashion. Who walks on water?
Yeah.
God does. And Jesus does.
Yeah.
So you still have elements of those there. But that time of temporary veiling, he's resurrected in his power. He's coming again, and there will be a great spectacle.
Right. But the salvation that was accomplished in the Exodus and the Red Sea is nothing compared to the salvation that God accomplished on the cross.
Yeah, it is only a prefiguring of what God did there.
Yeah.
It's meant to get you ready, like it's the prep you for it.
Yeah. And so we can look back and we can be encouraged in our prayer life.
Right.
Because of what God has done for us.
Yeah.
And also anticipating what he's going to do. But what he's going to do is always in light of the past.
Yep.
Jesus is coming in power and judgment would not be good news if he hadn't already come in humility and rescued us from sin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. The final point is praising God that he is enough.
Yeah. This one's really straightforward,
I like that you had that alliteration. You don't do that very often, Jay.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't do it on purpose.
Every one of your points begins with a P, brother.
Yeah. Okay, I did do that on purpose.
Okay.
I was a little sad. I wanted 3 different words with a P.
Okay.
But I had to go with the last 2 with
I gotcha.
the same word.
Well, you got to work with what
if it can go,
then
it works.
Right.
Praising God.
Praise God that he is enough.
Yeah.
I actually wrote down something that you said in my Bible, Jay. This is going to be in my Bible
forever.
Oh,
okay. What'd you write down?
I wrote, "This is what faith looks like when you have nothing to gain in this world at all."
Yeah, that's it.
Like
that's the whole point.
His world is coming apart at the seams. There's judgment and sorrow and death in the future, in the near future, and he still can say, I've got God, and so I've got enough.
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like I said, if you go to a Christian bookstore, you'll see this great contradiction. Like the literature that's there is health and wealth.
Yeah.
For the most part. Like you're not going to walk into a regular Christian bookstore. Like I don't mean the kind that maybe we would search out and go shop at.
Yeah.
Like your regular one that services American Christians. And it's health and wealth stuff. But they're going to sell the little pictures on the side with this verse on it.
Yeah.
And that does not make sense to me at all. At all.
Right.
Because they are the exact opposites.
Yeah.
You
got the Thomas Kincaid paintings.
Yeah.
And you got this verse.
But why aren't there dead cows everywhere in that painting? That's what I want to know. I want a realistic version. I might have to paint this picture and see if I can sell it.
Okay.
Dead cows, dead lambs.
Wilted vines.
Yeah, wilted vines, buildings on fire with smoke coming out of them.
Yeah.
in this verse.
Yeah. Right.
Think it'll sell?
Hey, I'd buy it. I'd put it up in my office, Jay.
Maybe. I might have to do this.
Okay.
So this is the idea. When your whole world's gone,
Right.
The way to think about it in your life would be like if, we got a taste of it, I think, even when the coronavirus stuff happened, and then, the supply chains even got messed up for a while in some areas.
Yeah.
But if you woke up one day and your Amazon Prime account was down, you know what I mean?
Did you hear the audible groans and exclamations when you said that?
No more
we hardly ever get any kind of like really audible response to something we said.
Yeah.
You've been going through this entire sermon and you get to that illustration and people audibly were like talking.
Can't order anything anymore. Yeah. No one's delivering to your house. Supply chains are broken.
Yeah. And
you go to Walmart and Walmart's shut down. And you have no place to get food.
Right.
Like everything collapses.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're even like, oh, well, I'll go to whoever's house. They've got cows. There's no cows. There's nothing. This is like Ukraine. This is like Eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
But worse, because there's no social media or any news to like. There's at least some measure of restraint for now. If there weren't any, look at the pictures of Eastern Ukraine. This is that.
Yeah.
This is what the Christians over there right now over there, they're still having church. There's some videos of them having church in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And this verse probably means a whole lot to them. They're living it. So that's the question to ask. If God didn't ever do a single thing for me for the rest of my life, would I still love him? I mean, he's already done more than you ever deserve in giving you Christ. But if he never did a single thing for you the rest of your life, if it was all downhill from here, materially, physically, I mean, you name it, would you still love him for being who he is? He's worthy, because he's worthy to be loved simply for who he is. And that's the idea.
Yeah. How do we do this, Jay? Like it's easy to say it, right?
Right.
It's easy to say it. It's easy to sing songs that go along with this. It's quite another when we're actually in the fire, mm-hmm. and actually living out this, because we often caveat something like this, like God is enough, but I hope this. But what he says is God is enough, even if all this bad stuff happens, and it's easy for us to pay lip service to this. It's easy to, like you said. I mean, it's easy to go to the Christian bookstore and buy that painting and put it up where everyone can see it, and then something bad happens, and you just are in despair. How do we actually put hands and feet to this?
I wish I would have talked about this a little in the sermon. So first,
here we are, Jay. We are. Let's talk about it.
So first thing, I think what you have here is a perfect ideal. Okay. And I do not think you can do it.
Okay. Hey, all right. Well, that's all today.
I will say not perfectly.
Right.
You can do it, not perfectly. Now, the beauty of this is you have one who has already done it perfectly.
Okay.
You have Christ.
Right.
So don't beat yourself up when you're already down and you go, oh, I'm not taking perfect joy in God.
Right.
I'm probably not even a believer.
Yeah. Well, we see this in Psalm 22, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? Mm. His world has fallen apart, and yet he still is trusting in God.
Yeah. So to remember that, first off, someone has already done this for you.
Right.
But yet this is the goal, is to that when you don't have anything in life, you need to remember the one thing that can't be taken from you is God himself. Mm. If you have God, then you already have everything. Yeah. You can't improve upon perfection. And I think we forget this idea when we talk about us. We have God. God has come to us and made his home with us. That's what God promises to us, through Jesus. If you possess God, you already possess infinite perfection. We don't talk about the infinite perfections of God, but He's the greatest in the universe. And I think this has to be how guys like Richard Rumbrand survived the gulags. How else could you survive?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you not just kill yourself?
Right.
Well, I think it's because maybe he didn't articulate it in these ways, but he already possessed the infinite perfection of God. And so he has the most valuable thing. So he could literally just waste away and starve to death, and he knows all I have from here to eternity is glory to be had.
Yeah.
But I think how you do it is you just try to meditate upon God's attributes of who He is and how all of these perfections became yours because of Christ. Well, they're not your perfections, but
right.
you have a real relationship with God. He is your God. That's how Habakkuk describes Him.
Yeah.
He's my God. You're God's possession, and God's yours too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Not like you own Him, but you're in this relationship with Him.
Yeah.
So you meditate upon that, on who God is. And then what can someone take from you if you're going to live forever? There's this aspect too, that this type of faith is caused by God. Maybe I didn't tease that out as good as I could. And I thought I was short on time, but I think I had more time than I did. The last verse Habakkuk talks about himself, that God has made him become like the imagery you could think of David when he is with his mighty warriors running through the hills of Judea, taking the high ground, like hunting their prey.
Yeah.
Like their feet are swift and they're moving like a warrior. They're on the high ground. That's the land of the conqueror.
Okay.
The conqueror has the high ground. And Habakkuk talks about himself like that. It makes no sense at all.
Right.
Like the world's gone. He has nothing. And now he talks about himself, that God has made him like a conqueror. I think so that there's that element we need to remember, that when you're that low, I think when you're that low, which most of us have never been that low, some of us have, but when you're this low, if you belong to God, He is going to cause you to live. And it's by faith. He's going to cause you to live by faith. He's going to make your feet like the feet of a deer. You're not going to make your feet like a feet of a deer. You're not going to take the high ground. He's going to do it for you. So how did the Jew, believing remnant, how did they survive the Babylonian exile? By their own power? No. By God causing them to live. They outlasted the Babylonians, or the Assyrians, Babylonians, who else? The Persians,
the
Greeks, the Romans. Christ came, and then Christians started doing it.
Yeah.
Christians overcame the world. And they did because God caused them to.
Yeah.
So I think there's that idea too. It doesn't mean we don't actively pursue it, but I think when you hit rock bottom, it'd be like if you found your kid, he's a total mess. He wiped out in a crash and he's got no power. You're just going to let him lay there in his own blood?
Yeah.
Or you're going to pick him up, clean him up, get him going again, Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the idea.
Okay.
Make any sense?
I think so. I don't know about everyone else, but it makes sense for me.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Any final words from Habakkuk for us?
I'm just kind of struck by the reality of how fortunate we are, even now, to live here. It's not always going to be like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that when I looked at this book is you try to kind of really self-evaluate. There's no guarantee, as we're closing this thing out, there's no guarantee for our children that this nation will be here, or even for us, really. We don't know what God's doing, what His works are, but I know we are open-handedly, just throwing sin in God's face. The kind that maybe has never even been done before. Like the Romans were very perverse people, and they were cruel, and they loved to watch people be torn apart by beasts, and they were into, all kinds of grotesque sexual immoralities. But we may be worse. We may be even worse than they are. And a nation doesn't do what we do, and God doesn't do something about it. Should make you fear a little bit,
Yeah.
And Habakkuk, I think, helps us to prepare if that came one day, if God came in judgment.
Yeah.
But we could survive because God will make his church persevere in this world, even in incredibly difficult times. So.
Okay. All right. Well, you finished out Habakkuk. It did not take you 5 years, like
I know,
like John.
I feel like I accomplished something, George.
Yeah, right.
Didn't take 5 years.
Right. So where are we going next?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know where we're going. You guys are trying to tempt me with Ecclesiastes.
All right.
And I love a challenge. I feel like you did it on purpose.
You dropped Ecclesiastes when I asked you.
Did I bring it up
last week? I asked you, what are you thinking next? And you said
maybe you did Inception on me.
Maybe. Maybe.
You planted it.
Maybe I planted that idea in your head. Yeah. This is a long con, Jay, trying to get you to do Ecclesiastes. This is all a long con to try to get you to do Job. So
yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll pick up with Hebrews on Sunday, and we'll be talking about Hebrews starting in chapter 5 and going through part of chapter 7. So we'll be doing that for Text Driven Tuesdays for the next several weeks, and then we'll see what happens after that. I guess.
Yep.
The future is unknown to us.
I think this summer some of the other pastors and elders at our church will preach. I may do a couple of Psalms in there, and then in the fall we'll jump in.
Okay.
I will definitely need to spend several months probably studying Ecclesiastes if I do that.
Okay.
What do you think? I mean, it looks challenging to me.
That's a challenging book, yeah. Yeah, I've thought about it before, and I always kind of shy away from it because it's a difficult book.
Because it can lend itself to moralistic preaching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for preaching Habakkuk, Jay.
Yeah,
I would encourage you that if you have not listened to those sermons, go back and you can find those on the Christ Fellowship Church Facebook page, and go back and listen to those, and hopefully that will be an encouragement to you. This has been helpful for me. I hope it's been helpful for others. And as always, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And we hope this will help you to become more and more conformed to Christ. We will see you next time.